So there's a sequel to Neon Genesis Evangelion that not many people know actually exists, and it's not something that's been out for years and years, like that PS2 sequel game that technically is a canon sequel, or the rebuild movies that came out. This is actually something that is still kind of being released. Actually, it's Neon Genesis Evangelion Anima, which is a light novel series. It was written by Ikuto Yamashita, who is the artist who designed the Evangelion mechs in both the original series and the rebuild movies. And this book follows an alternate timeline after the end of Evangelion, where instrumentality doesn't happen, everyone isn't turned into Orange Fanta, and it's set 3 years later, where all the EVA pilots are now 17 years old. That includes Asuka, Rei, Shinji, and all the other class students like Koji and Kensuke. And it actually uses a lot of ideas that were never actually used in the original anime series due to budget, time, or any other reason why they had to be discarded. So in this alternate future, there are actually 3 clones of Rei in orbit around the Earth with sniper rifles that shoot down any angel threat as soon as they're detected. And Rei is able to move her consciousness from, the Rei that we know, between the 3 clones at will, so she can inhabit any of her clone bodies when needed to. So it's one Rei consciousness, but you have extra clone bodies in EVA units in orbit. And the Rei that we know is called Rei Trois, and 3 clones are Quatre, Cinq, and Six, which is 4, 5, 6 in French. The very first page of the light novel actually shows you all of the characters that have been aged up. At the very top then, right next to Kensuke, you can see Rei's clones, Quatre, Cinq, and Six. In fact, you can see they don't look exactly the same, they have different hairstyles. And in fact, Rei Six is actually slightly younger than the others because she's the most recent clone. So she looks like a child compared to the other 2. The light novel also does have quite a few illustrated pages, which is generally pretty cool to look at some new Evangelion art, especially the designs for the EVA units in this. In fact, some of the EVA designs in Anima is actually really cool, and there are figures you can get of some of the designs that are currently available for pre-order. But they have some really interesting designs for Evangelion units in this, including ones that have 4 legs like a centaur, which visually is a really cool idea. As for the actual writing in this book though, it's fairly easy to read and understand, but I will say this, it's definitely made for Evangelion fans, because it talks a lot about things like AT fields and LCL as if you know what they are, so it doesn't explain any of those things. So this is definitely made for Evangelion fans. If you've never watched EVA or anything like that, this is going to be a hard book to get into, because they'll be talking about a lot of concepts like the Magi system that you might not know what it is, because it doesn't take the time to explain any of that. Now I will say one thing, I both read this book, but I've also listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by Tiffany Grant, who is the voice actress for Asuka in the English dub. And honestly, even though you're missing out on all the cool artwork in the book, I think the best way to enjoy it is via audiobook, because her performance is really good. In fact, I plan on reading the entire series in audiobook. I'm still currently going through it. At the time of recording, volume 5 has been printed in book form, but it's not available in audiobook format yet. It will be out later this year, and I am planning on just going through the audiobooks. They're not very long either. I think they're about 6 to 8 hours each. You can read through one in like a day or 2. But I do recommend it because her performance is one of my favorites. You've got obviously the voice of Asuka, but she does a very good performance as the other characters as well, like Shinji, Misato, Rei. I'm actually enjoying it quite a lot. The only downside is, of course, that you don't get the artwork, but you can always just Google the illustrations later if you want to check those out. Now, I did have some criticism about this though. So one of my issues with this, and I felt it reading the book and also in the audiobook. So because it's a light novel, there's not many words on each page. They're very easy to read through, but it kind of highlights an issue where there is a lot of action in this. In fact, it's a more like a that standard mecha anime than EVA, in the sense that it's definitely a lot more like mech on angel battle and such. And it kind of feels like it probably would have worked better as a manga, maybe even as an anime adaptation. I don't know if it'll get one, who knows? I think it's going to depend on how well this sells and if they want to adapt it. But when I'm listening to an audiobook or I'm turning a lot of pages during the combat scenes, it does seem to drag on for way too long. And I'm not sure if that would work better in a manga or an anime. Maybe in an anime because they can animate it a lot better. But as I was reading it and also listening to it, it did seem a bit long when the action started hitting, when we got into those moments of action and mech combat. I will say this though, the story so far isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I went in with this with low expectations because I hadn't heard about it from anyone else that I know loves EVA, and I'm not much of a light novel reader myself. I read a lot of fantasy like Neil Gaiman, Terry Pratchett, Brandon Sanderson, so I do sort of have a high standard when it comes to reading that I have high expectations for. And the prose in this book isn't anything to Like, it's not a complex read at all. I imagine it's probably written originally in Japanese and translated into English. I think that might have a role to play in why this book sort of feels simple, like it's written quite simply. But I also know that the author hasn't written anything before, so this is his first time writing a light novel. So I think it might be down to inexperience, possibly. Or it could be a combination of both of those things. But these are very easy novels to just consume and read in like a couple of sittings. And if you really enjoy the artwork in Evangelion, I would say, yeah, you would enjoy this book purely for the illustrations. But the story in it does have a few quirks, to say the least. So I'll get into some light spoilers for just the first volume for this. Very early on in the first volume, Rei Katra, who is one of the clones of Rei, falls out of orbit, and Shinji and Asuka need to catch her. And it's during the whole sequence then that they realize, because she changes trajectory as she's falling, that they realize, oh, she's not knocked out of orbit, she's falling on purpose. So the clone has sort of gained its own sentience. And the mass-produced Eva series from End of Evangelion have been remodeled into what they call angel carriers. And it's during this encounter with Rei Katra where Shinji just fucking dies inside Eva Unit 1, which is the first sort of big bombshell this book drops on you. But the Eva Unit eventually reconstructs Shinji's entire body, so brings him back to life. But his body sort of joins with Eva Unit 1 in a way that he can now control the Eva Unit without being in it, kind of like a puppet. And they also discovered a few new things about the Evas as well, so there's a few new quirks. So one of the earlier ones they mentioned is how when an Eva unit gets damaged in battle and it regrows its part, it sort of regrows it in the same style as the pilot in the mech. And because Asuka has now aged into a young adult and has grown breasts, Eva Unit 2 now has a more developed chest as well, which is how they show you that the Eva unit sort of mimic their pilots in a way, physically. But with Eva Unit 1, one thing they discover is the Eva unit has a heart, which is something they aren't supposed to have after it grows Shinji back. And once they outfit it with some new armor, which does look quite cool, it's got like an orange and purple color scheme, they rename it to Super Evangelion. And the version of Shinji in this book is also very different. I say very different. It's more developed than the one we get in the anime, in the sense that he has become more mature. And I think in this book, Shinji has had more full conversations than he's ever had in the entire anime that I can think of right now, actually. Because in the anime series, and even in the Rebuild movies, characters don't have conversations with Shinji. They sort of talk at him and he sort of is very passive. Like, I think the only character he does have any conversations with is Kaoru. But in this, he actually does have full conversations with the other characters. And it's not sort of out of character for him. He is slightly more confident and more comfortable as a person, just being himself, though he still does have a tendency to run away and be afraid, so that's still consistent. So just don't go into this novel expecting more of the same, because it does go in its own direction. It's not a bad direction, I don't hate it, I am interested in. At first I thought it was a bit strange and a bit quirky, but I am interested, I am hooked by this story, and I do want to see where it does go. If you want to see me do a spoiler video for the entire light novel series, let me know in the comments below. I'm more than happy to do so if people want to discuss this story. I might make one about the ending, depending on how I feel about it when I get to volume 5. But I do recommend checking them out if you're a fan of the series, especially the audiobooks. The final volume should be out in audiobook format on Audible by, I think, June 2024, which is a couple of months away. So yeah, do check them out if you're interested. I recommend it. I've been enjoying it myself. If you're more of a reader or you prefer to see the illustrations yourself in a book, you're free to go that way too. Let me know in the comments below if you are going to check it out or not. I've been enjoying it. I'm a big Eva fan, so I'm very biased towards it. But even when I went into this book series with reasonably low expectations, I was pleasantly surprised by it. So I do recommend giving it a go if you're curious about it. But enough from me about it. My name is Avatar Obi. If you want to see more of my content, please check out my other videos. Drop a like and subscribe, support my channel, all that good stuff. And comment below what you think about the anime series. If you think it should be adapted into an anime or a manga, if it should be a series or a movie. And I also live stream to this channel, so feel free to pop in whenever I'm streaming. I'll catch you in the next one.